Welcome back to Rapid7 in 7. In the previous episode, we talked about risk observability. In today's episode, we are going to talk about quantifying risk and how some of the challenges might portray themselves when it comes to sharing and capturing data for risk quantification. David, putting you on the spot now. How do you approach quantifying risk within a hybrid environment, especially when all these components can vary so much?
Yeah, it's really difficult because the compensating controls that exist in different types or in different areas of a hybrid environment will vary massively. So in on-premise, we probably have systems which live a long time. They act more like pets than cattle, and the converse is probably true in cloud. And like the compensating controls will be different, i.e. we might have a very like crunchy outer shell for our data centers and campus networks, and robust controls for users when they're on the road, but like we've got firewalls, we might have IPS, reverse proxies, like whatever it might happen to be. And so like all of those things, the concepts don't really exist in the same way within cloud. And so we need to understand what compensating controls there could be from the perspective of things like at a more base concept level, trust, identity, vulnerability. Probably those are some good starting points.
And when you say compensating controls, do you also mean as a more like coherent kind of shared goal?
Well, yeah, absolutely. If our goal is not getting popped, and if we look at an environment from an external or an attacker point of view, like what they will see is an attack surface. They'll see like IP addresses that they like might be able to ping or test or do port scanning on, or like whatever they want to do, and like we need to understand things like accessibility, like what could an attacker see from the internet, and then once we're at the asset level, like what vulnerabilities do we have, but then there might be better or worse compensating controls in different areas of the environment, and so we need a consistent view of how we quantify that risk back to the business in order to allow them to make decisions, probably.
Kind of digging into that a little bit further there, what are some of the difficulties in comparing risks that might seem similar on paper, but actually when you look at the real life impact, they're completely different?
Yeah, 100%. I think we need to have like a 360-degree view of the asset. So like I'll take an example and then we'll kind of build it out a couple of layers. A vulnerability, let's just say this vulnerability is a high CVSS score, like it's a 9 or a 10, and it exists in two different places within the environment. Okay, like if we are looking at risks from an individualistic point of view, then these might look really similar, but actually when we start to contextualize them, we realize that there's very, very different organizational impact. And so, like we spoke about this earlier, but what's the environment? Prod, dev. Okay, like, is there any production or is there any real data in dev? No. Okay, well, we start to understand a difference there. And with concepts like tagging and like assignation of ownership, we start to be able to bring these data points into to our solutions in a much more automated fashion than going out and having to try and, it's the age-old thing of like, how do we do credentialed scans for vulnerabilities when we don't know who the system owner is? So like getting this information in a dynamic way, and then saying, okay, like what identities are associated to it? Okay, well, there's an identity associated to this system with a vulnerability that it doesn't have MFA enforced. Like, okay, that's another route in to the system from an attack surface point of view. But you've got to look at risks from a resource-centric point of view. So like we need to understand if it has an NGAV agent on it. We need to understand if it's logging. We need to understand if it's accessible. We need to understand if MFA is enforced. And actually all of these bits of information exist in different systems. So like there is no, or rather there has not been, a place that has a resource-centric view that brings in all of these things. And that's one of the absolute key things that we're helping clients with this quantification. Yeah. Not just Rapid7 technology, all compensating controls, bringing that information in and giving a resource-centric view. Mm-hmm. So I believe that's the most empirical answer for how do we differentiate risks that in a kind of two-dimensional level might look very similar.
Yeah. So surfacing that in your example, the vulnerabilities and the CVE scores, for example, but adding that additional context around the environment as well and how that is being supported.
Absolutely, from third-party tools, from networking information, from identity information, and seeing all of that together.
And you've kind of alluded to some of this already, but what's a common mistake that you see teams make when they are capturing and sharing data for accurate risk quantification?
Yeah, I think essentially it boils down to looking at risk signals in isolation, either in isolation of other risk signals, in isolation of environmental context, or in isolation of business context. And actually getting those three things together is really, really difficult. And I think we're talking about people, process, technology. I think that is something which technology can absolutely help with.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that is a wrap on episode 4. In the next episode, we are going to talk about risk prioritization, how to create action plans and ways to achieve better cross-functional collaboration within your security teams.